New York City's. It's time to kiss and make up.
Pod Thorn. Pod Thorn. Pod Thorn.
Sam, I got a terrible migraine. You out there, man? I can't even hear you. I don't know. Did I lose you?
I'm here.
Sam, these eyes can't take staring at these screens so much anymore. My head is killing me. But I am relieved about one thing. I'm relieved that our Brooklyn Nets did a good thing yesterday.
Yes, sir.
I want to read to you the statement put out by the Nets org yesterday. And the reason why I want to read it is because I even think there was negotiation around the words that are on this thing. Like you could tell there was a negotiation because they used terms like partnership. The boardroom logo is on it. I don't know if they meant to put the 35 Ventures logo on instead of the but let me read this to you. The following statement has been released by General Manager Sean Marks. Important to know who said it, right? The very first word. Steve Nash and I, right? I don't think people understand how aggressive because they're the ones that was about to get fired, right? They were the ones that was asked to leave. I'm not reading into it too much, am I? Or
No,
do you
not at
agree?
all.
Like this press release or this release or whatever it is, joint statement is structured and it has little things in it. Anyway, Steve Nash and I, together with Joe Tsai and Clara Wu Tsai, which I also think it's important that she was involved.
Yep.
Sometimes having a clear-headed woman amongst emotional men get decisions made.
Absolutely.
Impasses get crossed. Joe Tsai and Clara Wu Tsai met with Kevin Durant and Rich Kleiman in Los Angeles yesterday. We have agreed to move forward with our partnership. So I think people tend to mince the words of partnership. No, you work for me and you do. Like, I think that's why it's so important that you have an ownership group that's good at their job, that doesn't have chips, like, just weird chips on their shoulder, like I gotta be better than my dad was or some stupid shit like that.
Yep.
And you want ownership that'll cut the check, be judge and jury at the end of the day, or the buck stops here, like type of thing where, if Kevin and Sean can't get it together and it comes to my desk, I'm gonna, handle it the right way. I think it was important to have a guy like Joe Tsai so that you could use the term partnership. Some of these NBA owners don't view it as a partnership when it absolutely is. The players and the ownership, like, even though there's only 30, 32 owners, depending on if they have groups or whatever, minority, majority stakeholders, however it may be. But it's a small club, and there's about 500 players, 400 some odd actively playing on a team. It is a partnership between them. That's why they have to have collective bargaining. That's why they have to come to the table and agree. So it's an okay word, but I'm positive that was a word asked for by the 35 Ventures guys. So he says, to move forward with our partnership. That partnership word means a lot. We are focusing on basketball with one collective goal in mind: build a lasting franchise to bring a championship to Brooklyn. If that is Kevin Durant's goals, is to build a lasting franchise, that means he's staying a long time, and he's making that commitment with his little boardroom stamp on the joint. He's making that commitment without Kyrie having gotten his contract.
Yep.
And then, of course, you've got the Brooklyn Nets logo and you've got the boardroom logo at the bottom, which goes to show that it is a partnership, because most of the players play for the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, Kevin Durant, in some kind of way, is a part of the boardroom, and he's being lent out to the Brooklyn Nets. Nah, it's weird, but I understand it. Go ahead. What's your thoughts on these historic words?
I mean, it's funny because I think me and you have kind of been on this in terms of, and Kool-Aid as well, in terms of, that this was about ego and pride, and this was not nearly as much about Kyrie as everyone thought, and I think we can kind of put that to rest. Like the fact that that KD had the boardroom logo be in this, in this letter,
right?
Which by the way, we've never seen before. We've never seen a team make a joint statement ending a trade request stalemate that the team had no role in at all. This was all orchestrated by KD the entire time.
Right.
But then at the same time, Nash and Marks, probably because of their own ego and pride and maybe a little bit of pettiness, whatever it is, starting out by saying Steve and I and whatnot, shows that this was a battle of who's in control, and the use of the word partnership again is an example of KD trying to save face about the fact that everything that happened this summer wasn't about Kyrie, and it wasn't about the Nets roster, and it wasn't even about Sean Marks as the GM or Steve Nash as the coach. This was about the fact that KD thought that he was getting the LeBron GM treatment, and that he was going to be running this franchise. And when Tsai and Marks saw where this was going and where this was headed, with the fact that they traded for one of his best friends in Harden, who then dipped and they lost all their assets for that. When they saw that the player that KD came with has been completely unreliable, Marks and Tsai rightfully, and I guess in our minority opinion, wanted to make this organization become a basketball organization again, and not just a group of quote unquote hoopers deciding when they want to come as they go. And so overall, I thought the letter was semi-pathetic from KD's standpoint. I thought from the Nets standpoint, it was whatever. It was let's move on. Training camp's in a month and change. Right. It's water under the bridge. Who cares? But I think you quickly saw that this was a lot about ego and pride. And
pride. Yep.
And
power.
That's about and power. Right. Exactly. And so from that perspective, great. I'm glad that the boardroom logo was put on it. As you said, I'm surprised the 35 Ventures logo wasn't there. I pass by that office every single day when I walk to go play basketball. But whatever it is, I'm happy we're at where we're at now.
Yeah, and again, it's I don't want to do the hand wringing, but I listen to everybody else's pod in Nets World, and it's just amazing how much we take seriously the nonsense we hear on Twitter, even if it doesn't match the reality of the actions taking place. One, this wasn't about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
Yep.
And here's why. Whose name is not on that report?
Kyrie Irving.
Who wasn't at that meeting?
Kyrie Irving.
He's not the crux of this problem. The word and I think Kool-Aid's people was hearing it too. It's so crazy. Me and Kool-Aid, our basketball worlds keep crashing. I know you guys must get tired of that in the group chat. That
No, I like it.
it's pretty cool. One of our guys is a Brooklyn basketball legend, but he's not even the real legend. His dad is the legend. His dad is the legend around here. But point being, we heard from people that we knew that the word from Kevin, and we're seeing reports that kind of mirror that, is that the Nets lied to him in some kind of way. They promised him something that they're not giving him. He has Kyrie. He couldn't play with Kyrie at the Suns. He couldn't play with Kyrie at Boston, and he was willing to go both of those places. If playing with Kyrie is the needed thing, if that's the obstacle to everything, that you would put your basketball bona fides, your legacy on the line, you would hold out and not play. Kyrie's playing. Kyrie said he was playing with or without you.
Yep.
Like, he explored the market. He checked it. He found out it's not sweet out there right now. But Kyrie wants to play, and he wants to play in Brooklyn. How is it possible that we're still reading this little love note from 35 Ventures, wrong logo? He must not have had the logo on his phone when he sent it to
A JPEG.
He didn't have. He only had a JPEG of the podcast. But so, like, if you can't tell this was about power, just from our little dissecting of the letter, the logos, the term partnership, the long lasting in Brooklyn. This Kyrie still hasn't gotten a contract, and he's talking about long lasting, and he stamped it, and he boardroom, so you know this is coming from them. I wish we knew why all of this was happening, but it's clear it has more to do with Harrington and those guys, and it's also clear right now the best thing that they could have done was stand up to those guys, and I'm really proud of our podcast for being one of the few that, like, the decision to run it back hasn't been a foregone conclusion for a long time. But the decision to stand up for them, to say, okay, we've tried it this way the last 3 years, and if you want me to hold Marks and Nash accountable, you're going to have to try it our way, to see if the old way that got us here, the old way that attracted you here, still works.
Yep.
Right? We don't need a coach in the locker room that works for you. That's just not a good hierarchical structure at a company. Most people don't like that word, but Kevin Durant, you're a subordinate to Steve Nash, to Sean Marks, and to Joe Tsai. And clearly he didn't feel that way. And of course he's the most important piece in on the team. But it kowtowing to him to continue doing the same thing, which if you go back to our podcast right after we lost, I said this team will know if they're going to be a good team ever if they understand why they were bad this season. If they don't understand why they're bad, if internally within their four walls, within their gym, if they don't know what went wrong this season, they're never going to fix it. And it's clear they have an idea. It's clear they're taking accountability. Taking accountability is not just keep doing what KD and Kyrie want. Taking accountability is like, this is on me. I have to make these decisions. I have to make these choices. And I don't see anything wrong with that. As you dissected, Sam, what do you see anything wrong with with how this was done, or how this can move forward?
No, like if anything, it's funny. I was talking to my dad about it today, and I was like, from Mark's and Tsai's perspective, who I think people like me and you and
Shout out
Kool-Aid
Dad, by the way, one of the best Nets fans. I hope he can make it through. This shit is annoying, but
he's getting.
I have so much respect for Pops. Can't wait to meet him.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we got to make that happen. But and we were saying that like for people like me and him and you and Kool-Aid, who have been probably more partial to the Marks and Tsai wing of the Nets, like it's funny how in the grand scheme of things, from an optics perspective, this was like a lose-lose, because they got what they wanted, and meanwhile every Nets fan is like, oh, well, they didn't actually win because this was all avoidable in the long term, and like, what did they even get out of this? And it's like, no, you just missed the entire point of this entire summer.
It was a power struggle, because it was because the reason why they come to those ideas, Sam, really quick, is because they don't understand what's going. They make it more of a soap opera than it needs to be.
Yep.
It never, no one grown man cannot and should not be worried about another grown man's paycheck. Kyrie made a lot of decisions on his own that I don't think, like, even seeing KD go hang out with James Harden tells me that he kind of was on James' side. And James, we know why he left. And I don't know why we keep getting, like, whenever things are vague, they try to create these stories and say these vague predictions, like, one sentence, we're playing checkers, not chess. Like some stupid shit to make you think they know what the fuck they're talking about, and then it twists it like deforms the fan base, and they think these stupid things, and they come on my timeline and they want to kill me for saying, look, this is business, and that's all it is.
Yeah, and I know me and you have been on this bandwagon, and people have called us on Twitter or Spaces or whatever, like, condescending and acting too academic about this entire topic. But like, this entire saga was a battle of like, will logic and rationality like finally win out? Will free market and what someone's actually worth actually win out, or is this going to continue down like this roller coaster of like looniness and like whatever happens and there's no rhyme or reason for anything that's going on? So if you start out chronologically for what happened this summer, you have the Kyrie thing where Kyrie's like, I want a max contract, and every Kyrie stan or Nets fan who's obsessed with Kyrie is like, well, you just have to give it to him. And someone like you who was on this even like months ago, if not a year ago, was like, this guy doesn't have value, and we can prove it legitimately by who the suitors are and whether suitors are willing to do anything for him. And we quickly saw that with the amount of talent that Kyrie has and what he's accomplished, and the fact that he was 50, 40, 90 less than a year ago, and was even good in the games that he played this year, like, he had zero trade value, like zero. People were attaching bad contracts like Kyle Lowry and like another bad contract.
Wait, my favorite, Sam. The Lakers thought the Nets were going to trade them because they need shooting, of course. Joe Harris and Kyrie Irving for Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, like his value was so in the toilet, and no one understood, like, well, dude, even if his value's in the toilet, just give him a max. And it's like, no, that's not
because you don't
how
lose
work.
KD.
You don't get a max as a God-given gift, no matter how talented you are, just because you think you deserve a max. Like, we're seeing with other players, and I've reiterated this point a million times, when someone of Kyrie's caliber becomes a free agent, teams move heaven and earth in order to get cap space for him. There was not one team that did that. Even the Lakers could have tried a million different things and attached picks and Taylor Horton Tucker and whatever, and they got kind of close, but not really, and not even anything that the Nets wanted. So you go like, that's the first part. And then KD demands a trade, no one really understands why. Even to this point, like, we still don't totally know why. We think that it's because of, like the power struggle that we talked about early on, but he hasn't even himself said it. And he wants to get traded to a team that's a title contender, but yet at the same time he wants to be recognized as the best player in basketball and whatnot. So he wants to have his cake and eat it too, in terms of getting the respect from the entire league, but also wants to gut the Nets and at the same time not gut the team that he's going to. And like, rational, logical basketball thinking is like, that's just not going to happen. Like he was either going to go to a team and that team was going to be gutted and be worse than the team that he's going to,
right?
Or he was going to stay with the Nets, or if he wanted to, which none of us really thought he was going to do, he could have faked an injury and basically like had a holdout, which I think people like me and you were like, if you want to do that and completely destroy your legacy, like, please go
and
ahead.
It's not even destroying the reputation part in terms of, are you a good guy or are you a bad guy? It's just simple. Are you moving up on the scorers list?
Right.
When people, when Trey and his friends are going to be sitting around talking about who are the best scorers, and they see you 17th on the list, they're not going to put you in the conversation with Kobe and all those guys. And then anybody who says that doesn't matter just shows how naive the fan base is. Yep. You're not paying attention. Kevin Durant, that shit is the most important shit to Kevin Durant. And guess what? My son is a hooper. He knows exactly how many buckets he makes every game. And yesterday I was shocked. He was like sitting there quietly calculating. And looked at me. He was like, I've had 34 buckets. But you know where I messed up, Dad? I didn't separate the three-pointers because I've only started making three-pointers this year. So he was sitting there calculating his numbers. Trust me, if you look at Kevin Durant in a post game, he's always looking at that sheet of paper. Yep. He's always saying, well, got a few rebounds tonight, but the scoring and where he is in the scoring list, because you're playing for your basketball immortality. And the children that cover this team just didn't understand that. He's got I don't know how many ways I had to say it. 4 years. Cuatro. Fo. He's got 4 years left on his contract. What could he have done, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, and that right. His only other option that he had, which no one really thought he was going to do, was to either like threaten, I'm going to get some elective surgery like Kyrie did in Cleveland, or he could have faked an injury and held out. But like, this dude wants to play, and also like that's not and the other thing is like, you can do that like with the Anthony Davis and the James Harden of the world if you have a year or a year and a half left and like the team wants to get playing. But as you said, like, you can't, like, with 4 years left, he just didn't have it. And I think, like, and I've said this from the beginning, and I truly feel this way. I think he thought that he was a bigger-than-life player who was going to be able to bully this, like, franchise that has an inferiority complex the size of fucking Russia, and was going to get the Nets to, like, cave to just a Suns trade because that's where he wanted to go. And there was a potential trade that kind of somewhat made sense. And when that didn't happen, that's where he basically went to plans B through Z. And, you have all these different leaks about different teams and wanting Nash and Marks fired. Like, even Kevin O'Connor said yesterday on his podcast, which I was reading a quote from, I didn't listen to, but he basically said exactly what we said, which was that the Nash Marks firing thing wasn't like a personal thing. He knew that was basically dropping an atomic bomb, which is what he said in the moment. This was never about, like, firing them because they're not doing a good job, or because they aren't good at their job, or because he hates them personally. He did that because he knew that would be his last resort in terms of getting traded fast. Right. And Marks and Tsai saw through it and was like, no. And then, as we see with the media cycle, something else became the story 24 hours later, and everyone forgot about it. And like, right. And so like the Nets and Tsai, so the Nets, Marks, Tsai, whoever, played this all perfectly. And I think the organization did gain some power back, and that's probably where we should like somewhat pivot to in terms of what did like the org get out of this, which is that you have Kyrie playing on a contract deal, final year, where we know that he in general doesn't want to uproot and move his entire family to Los Angeles, even though he'll threaten that as much as he wants. Right. And if he plays well, I think he's going to get a max. It seems like things have been worked out there. You have KD, who's still under contract and nothing has changed. And I think the part that you've been pushing a lot, which I agree, is you also have a coaching staff that now seems more fucking aligned and doesn't have like all these mini assistant coaches that aren't actually assistant coaches, but are actually like personal trainers for the players. Like, I think having Igor and having some of these other guys who seem like they have some type of personal connection with Nash is much more cohesive and makes much more sense. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and Nash will get fired. But at least you're putting your best foot forward in terms of what coaching is.
Right, and at least you don't look like the type of organization that flails. What I don't think people recognize how important it is to be a contrast to the Knicks. Now, people say, "Oh, you talk about the Knicks so much. Why do you care? They don't have anything to do with this." No, they do, because if you're a player that wants to play in New York, you have to choose between us and them. And Donovan Mitchell has chose them. He's always, I guess he's from upstate New York. He fits the profile of a Knicks fan, and I get why he wants to go. But Donovan Mitchell is I think not even a 1B. He's a 2A level player, and we're going to be fighting for those type of players in the future. We have to look like we couldn't do what the Knicks did with Carmelo Anthony and caved to everything and switched up the coach when they had D'Antoni, and the entire fan base blamed D'Antoni for what was going wrong, which is so hilarious because now our fan base wants D'Antoni. But the Knicks fans were killing D'Antoni, didn't want D'Antoni. The team put his replacement on the bench in Mike Woodson. All of these things that, like, I don't think I'm smarter. It's just I've seen really, really bad basketball management from the New York Knicks, and the Nets resisted being that big market team that whores themselves for players. And they stood up to this, and that's what I've been rooting for. It broke my heart that Kevin Durant was acting this way. But the moment he started acting this way, for the interest of my team, that's who I'm aligned with, I'm going to say, don't cave. Until you get every single thing you want, you do not cave. You have the leverage. And they did that. And you know what, Tsai, you deserve let me give him the whole kick to the Tsai.
I'm right there with you. I think it's a great moment I think it's a really good moment for the franchise. I think that even like Ryan Russillo did a whole opening on his podcast yesterday, and he said, like, look, this is like a rare moment where the organization actually stood up, because usually the organization always has to cave to the player, and in every single recent trade demand we've seen that, and the Nets didn't do that. And let's be honest, like, people in generally, you don't, because you're lucky and you don't have the Nets inferiority complex that other Nets fans do, but people think of the Nets as this team that's just where the players end up being bigger than the team itself, and the Nets had more respect for themselves than I think anyone besides you really expected.
But you want to know what's fucked up about that? Like, they take that low self-esteem and they expect Tsai to have it too, and they expect Sean Marks to have it too. Sean Marks and Tsai, they weren't a part of whatever happened in New Jersey.
Yep.
They don't. All they know is, since we've been here, we could sign almost anybody we want, and they can. They've turned down elite players. So playing in New York is a whole different can of worms, and we've got to think along those lines, like that we're one of the big boys. We can't stop thinking we don't play in the swamp. Any given in the middle of the week, Rihanna could be just sitting right there next to the bench. This is a different thing. You understand what I'm saying to you? Like,
yep.
We're in Brooklyn now, and we have to stop formulating that concept of, oh, nobody's gonna sign here because we're in New Jersey. We're not in New Jersey. We're a different team. We have to have a different calculus when it comes to that.
You know,
Sam, I want to read.
By the way, that's. I just want to add one thing. That's a great point, and I want to echo actually a point that Bill Simmons made about the Red Sox when they finally broke the curse, which I think really does relate to that. Like when the Red Sox broke the curse, Bill Simmons said, like one of the reasons why he thinks that happened is because like in the 70s and 80s, a lot of the Red Sox players were these Massachusetts bred, like Southie projects, whatever guys who knew what the curse meant. Guys
right.
Guys like Pedro and David Ortiz who come from the Dominican Republic and are like
they don't know what that shit is.
They don't give a shit about some fucking like dumb curse that has to do with like a bunch of like white people from 100 years ago. And so it's kind of similar. It's like Joe Tsai, like for whatever the Jersey thing is, Joe Tsai's like, I could buy the state of New Jersey.
Exactly. You have the second or third richest owner and we're crying about whether like we need to be worried about who we're gonna sign to pair with Ben Simmons when he's running the team. Like that's just who we are now. Like and I don't understand. Like, yes, is Darren Williams a country boy and probably would have preferred to be somewhere out in the Midwest or in Texas somewhere? Yeah, probably. But he re-signed with the Nets because the Nets isn't Cleveland. The Nets isn't Orlando. The Nets isn't New Jersey. This is New York City. This is the top of the heap. If we ever win a championship, we'll be top 3 in value of team. This is the biggest market. Players want to play here, not just to play basketball, but for the other things that they can do in their life, which is so strange about this KD thing. He's winning living in New York. He's accomplishing all the things he wanted to accomplish off the court. And he would just leave off this bullshit. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I want to read this to you and get your reaction.
Yep.
I think an unsung hero in this thing is Andre Iguodala. And I'll tell you why. Andre Iguodala isn't he's not Draymond. See, Draymond thinks he's smarter than what he really is. Iguodala is really a brilliant dude, brilliant investor. He does his stuff as himself. He's got a pretty cool venture capital fund. He is a smart, well-read guy. And let me hear. They asked him, what does he think of the Durant situation before the decision was made, and he said, I think he should stay in Brooklyn. It's such a big market. It's good for the game. And just figure out how to make it work, like everybody grow up and make it work. That's how I feel about the situation. And that was Iguodala on the Point Forward podcast, and then, but I like the second part. This is a situation where it's either, look, man, just come out here and play or don't play because you got 4 years. We got you for a while. So if you're not like, so it's not like you're on an expiring contract and then you can just take off a year and we just give up a year. Like, Iguodala got it. That's all I've been saying for a long time. And yep. I'm surprised the Nets fans didn't attack him, call him racist. But it's so simple what's going on, but we got to make it so much more. And I'm glad cooler heads prevailed. You wanna say anything before we get off this topic?
No, I mean I think you're totally right. Look, there were too many people, and I forgot what podcast said this, but one of them that I was listening to was like, you realize that there's usually something wrong when the internet, which can't agree on anything, like there were very few people besides like legitimate like crazy KD Kyrie stance, which we know way too many of them. But besides that, right. There was like no one who was like, you know what, I think KD's really onto something with this trade request. Everyone was like, dude, what the hell is going on? Like, it was especially as the days went on. It's one thing to like, request it and and it's like, okay, maybe like they want to have a breakup, whatever. But it's like, as the days went on, literally people from all walks of life who can't agree on anything. Like, I thought you were gonna end up having, like a Nancy Pelosi, like Kevin McCarthy joint statement about the Kevin Durant thing, because like literally everyone was like, I don't really understand where everybody's coming from on this.
But here's the craziest thing about that though, it just goes to show, we had too small of a fan base for this many superstars, because what happened was the fan base got really big, really fast out of the blue, and the stands are almost as many stands as there are like, actual Nets fans. Yeah. And so it kind of like confused, because when you talk to the people who we've been talking to for years and years, like, before this trade ever happened, before Kyrie and KD ever got here, all of them, almost to a man, basically agree, like people like Bruce and cats like that. Like, everybody agrees, like, you don't give up to KD. You do what's best for the Brooklyn Nets. And then the other side of it kept on just making up these other things like, oh, this is why you're going to lose Kyrie, and if you lose Kyrie, you're definitely losing KD. They lied to him. He said he was coming here to play with Kyrie, and now he can't do it. He can do it. Yep. He can. He very much can do it. Other places too, but Kyrie didn't want to leave, and all of that had nothing to do with it, because KD changed his tune so fast, and I know it had to be over something that happened, that was dealing with KD, because like I said, the stamp at the bottom of that announcement is the boardroom. And they didn't even involve Kyrie. Let's talk about the roster. Let's move on from this. You're happy, I'm happy, right? We're happy.
Absolutely.
We're right. Running it back is the best thing. But I never was afraid of not running it back too. So.
Yep. Same here.
My thing was get everything you can in the trade. That wouldn't have been bad for me either. But I think the Nets stepped in shit by accident, and the shit was made of gold. I don't think Steve Nash wanted to do the Harden trade.
I agree.
Right?
Yep. And Mars, both of them.
Yeah, I don't think KD wanted to do it. I think a lot of this has to do with that, because in Kevin's mind, part of it is, we need a big three. And he might not be sold on Ben. But Kevin Durant doesn't have good taste in basketball players. Like, and it's not because they don't know basketball, it's because they're fish in the fishbowl. If you're a fish in a fishbowl, what does wet feel like? You know what I mean? What if are you master of your domain, or is everybody walking around your fishbowl master of your domain? Like, you don't know where you stand, and that, I think that's what happens to a lot of players. They're fish in a fishbowl, and when they do things, they're not even sure how it's gonna end up or it's gonna turn up. So, I think this is the best version of the Brooklyn Nets that I've ever seen. This is better than the year one team. This is better than the year two team with Jeff Green, which I think has been the best role player. This is definitely better than last year's team. Last year's team was by far the worst. What do you think? Where are we right now?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this team. I mean, I think they definitely have a move or two to make it probably a bit more balanced, just in terms of, adding a big. I actually still I know a lot of people think that they're good on the wings. I think that they could probably use just like a bigger one, just because some of their wings are a bit undersized with Royce and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But look, now that KD is supposedly staying, I think the Royce O'Neal trade makes even more sense, and I was always a fan of it because I think that you just need, as we've already seen in terms of like what he's done, and you probably know this more in terms of him coming to like camps involving younger Nets fans and whatnot. Like the dude is an adult. He is he's beloved in every locker room he's been in. He's an incredibly hard player. Last year he didn't play well, but to be honest, like I kind of think that with teams that are stale and when everyone knows a big shakeup's going to happen, I think a lot of times a lot of players on those teams don't have as great a years. Like I think that Jazz team, everyone needed a reset. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to see what happens with Royce. But yeah, I mean, look, you go up and down the lineup, like and just for anybody listening, like you have, KD, Kyrie, Simmons. You have Harris, you have Seth Curry, you have Royce O'Neal, you have Patty Mills, you have Claxton, you have T.J. Warren, Summer, Edmund Sumner, who they got from the Pacers, and then you also add the rookies and Cam and Kessler and Day'Ron and whatnot. On top of if David Duke is back, like. I think the roster is pretty loaded, and I think that they still, have a move or two to make. They still have open roster spots. We've heard different names being listed, like, the Dwight Howard, Melo, Tristan Thompson, Markieff Morris. Those have been the four names I've probably seen the most.
The Markieff Morris thing could be real.
Yeah, the Markieff Morris thing seems like it might have legs. And, so I'm excited. I think they definitely need another center. I think they definitely need I would like another bigger wing. Unless Kessler, makes some type of leap, which I'm not sure about. Although I guess we'll see how T.J. Warren looks. But overall, I think the roster is really solid. And, you can't tell me that their roster is that much worse, if worse at all, than any roster in the East right now. Like, I think you go up and down. I think, obviously, the Sixers made good moves. I think the Bucks are, they're still dealing with a Middleton injury. It doesn't look like they're going to go into this season being healthy. You look at, the Heat obviously lost P.J. Tucker, and beyond that, I think they had a
P.J. Tucker was important to them.
Yep, which I think also goes to show how the Sixers got better. But, obviously the Hawks remade their team a lot, but I think none of us think that they're, some different team just because they got DeJounte Murray. But, yeah, I mean, look, overall, I'm excited. And to be honest, I'm in the rare camp where I think the Celtics – even though they basically kept the exact same team and added Gallinari and Brogdon, I think they now have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And Brogdon is a guy who is pretty opinionated. He's someone who people think is going to run for Congress one day. He was like the president at UVA. And I think you have a guy like Brogdon, you have Smart, you have Jaylen Brown, you have Grant Williams, you have Al Horford. You have a lot of outspoken dudes and a lot of guys who also – think that they should be playing. I think the Celtics kind of called lightning in a bottle last year.
Right.
And I'm not totally sold on them being this juggernaut. Like, I'm actually surprised that Vegas has them as the favorite. And the last thing I'll say about them is, Udoka coaches in a certain style that is really demanding on players, and I think can also get on players' nerves. And to me, it reminds me a bit of like Thibodeau at the beginning, where Thibodeau always has a really good first year because everyone's locked in. But these guys are also getting paid like anywhere from $6 to $60 million a year now at this point. People don't want to have a high school coach like coaching them all the time. Like, I think that's why you saw guys like Nash getting gigs and Steve Kerr getting gigs and whatnot. Like, I'm just personally not sold about everything Boston, and I you're kind of with me on that as well.
Again, the Boston thing is hilarious because people will only go, "Oh, we swept you last year. But we gentlemen swept you the year before, and we're better this year than we were the year before." Last year we had glaring injuries, and even still, with that happening, we almost beat them both games at home. And I know almost doesn't mean anything. Almost doesn't count. True. However, those games were too close for comfort. Now you're telling me if we have been, and not just the shooting of Joe Harris, but just the scrappiness, the defensiveness, the winning plays that Joe Harris does. I hope he still does them coming back from this injury.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, if you have that guy back and you have Ben Simmons, we could play a game like we haven't got better, but we have. Trust me, Malcolm Brogdon is a pretty good big addition. It's not as big as Ben Simmons. It's not as big as Royce O'Neal. It's not even as big as T.J. Warren, because we needed T.J. Warren more than they needed Malcolm Brogdon. Now that Malcolm Brogdon is there, the ball is going to be out of the hands of their scorers or for a time. And Malcolm Brogdon isn't like a play creator, like he's going to come down and run an offense and look like Chris Paul out there.
Yep.
I want to see them guard Kyrie when Ben Simmons is on the floor. I want to see them guard Joe Harris when you have to think about all those other guys and he's just sitting in the corner by himself wide open. I think not only will Royce O'Neal match his career high on 3 points taken, I think he's going to shoot above 40% and maybe have his best time ever because he's going to shoot wide open. Now, I'm telling you, like I hear a lot of Nets fans capitulating to these teams, agreeing with their own with other teams' propaganda. Yo, fuck that. You can't sit here and tell me that we need a stretch 5 to beat these teams. We don't. We were gonna beat a fully healthy Bucks team, which I think is better than a fully healthy Celtics team. Irregardless of what happened, and I know irregardless is not a real word. Irregardless of what happened last year, I think the Bucks are better than them, and really that's the team we have to worry about. Based off of what our lineup has in it, they could play a little bit bigger than us. Did Brook Lopez re-sign with them?
Yeah, he's back.
Yeah, so if I was worried about anybody, it would be them. It's not Boston. Boston, if you have the parts that we have now, I don't care about coach. I don't care about anything. We should beat them handily. Let me ask you a question. If you had to choose between a Markieff Morris, which would cost you nothing, and a Miles Turner, which would cost you at least Joe Harris, which one would you do?
See, the Miles Turner thing, I'm so torn about because that dude is like, he is really disliked in Indiana, and he gets hurt constantly, and he always averages a ton of blocks, but as we know, that doesn't necessarily mean he's actually a good rim protector himself. So, like, to give up Joe for a guy like Turner, if you told me it was Seth, who I actually love, for Miles, that I would understand him more. Joe's body, I just think is really helpful for the current NBA, but I honestly think that Seth now has more trade value than Miles Turner. The Pacers were having trouble getting a first for Miles Turner at this point. That dude is and he's a free agent after this year. They really missed the boat on trading him, and that's why I think the Nets have to be kind of creative. And I think we'll see. I think we'll see Marks be creative because I think now and this is something we kind of mentioned at the top, but we should also restate. The Nets have a lot of guys with a lot of chips on their shoulders, and I tend to like that. You got Kyrie in a contract year.
Love it.
That report that Christian Winfield had that Marks got an extension clearly didn't prove to be true.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically have Marks in a contract year. You got Ben Simmons, who's ready to prove everybody wrong. I think KD obviously is coming off of getting swept for the first time in his career. That. I think everyone's going to be all in, and I think the Nets are going to do some creative things as well. So, I guess I'd have to lean to give a long-winded answer. I'd probably rather have a Markieff guy, also because the Nets need somebody who, if, someone like Darius Garland's coming down the lane, the Nets need someone who can, will elbow him in the chest. And
Right.
Markieff has no problem getting a flagrant. So, which I think the Nets desperately need, and I think that's been a weakness for Sean Marks in terms of getting a guy like that. But
I'm gonna call Bam because he's the Miles Turner. He's the Miles Turner guy. Let's see if we get him. You still there, right, Sam? Oh, look at me. Did I lose you, Sam? You still there, Sam?
Yep.
To pick up on Bam, I had to put you on hold. That didn't make sense. Let me see if I can. Well, he'll text me if he wants to be added. All right, let's keep it rolling. All right.
By the way, so now Brian Lewis has now also tweeted about the Markieff Morris interest.
Oh, what do you say?
What'd you say?
What do you say?
He basically said that that's another guy of interest. And by the way, maybe the most important quote that I've seen all day from Brian Lewis, who, by the way, like Nets fans dislike for some reason, and he's probably the best beat reporter that they have, along with the Athletics' Alex Schiffer. Like, both
there's
those guys,
so many followers in Nets fans. Like I'm not gonna mention any names, but there's one particular dude that told this ridiculous story, and the Nets fans hold on to it, and now they're calling him a snitch. Listen, Brian Lewis has been a journalist for a long, long time. I give him all kinds of shit, but I never give him shit about being a professional. I never give him shit. I give him shit about not asking hard questions in a press conference, but I would never say that dude is not a professional or not a snitch.
Yep.
The man has a job to do. He makes about what I made when I got out of college, and for that thankless job that's more really about the profession and how important it is to society that people actually do the journalism profession, because he's not getting Woj money to do it,
right?
You know, and if he's showing up to these press conferences, if he's taking a long train back home, you know, every day covering this team, and you know, staying up till 12 o'clock at night to you know, file a story, your editor is not trying to hear that Kyrie just didn't show up.
Right.
If he complained to the league that on when Kyrie was supposed to be made available, which is the partnership between the league and the players get put on this pedestal because the league markets them. Public relations and earned media is important to that. It is an important cog to this whole basketball ecosystem. And to call him a snitch because he used the only tool, it's like when those people, you know, the little old lady, people shoot through her window, she calls the police and they call her a snitch. What are you talking about? What is the little old lady supposed to do? She's supposed to bang with the gangsters? No, there's nothing he could do. He's got a job to fill. It's a very competitive job. There are probably 40 people that graduated from your school this year that want to take that job. And hundreds of schools across the country would love to have that position. But he has to do it. He has to do that job. And if he reported to the league that Kyrie wasn't showing up for press conferences, why the fuck should that make us mad at him?
Yep.
He's just some schlep trying to do his job.
100%. And so, by the way, so the good quote that he had today was, quote, a net source said this isn't just an uneasy ceasefire or temporary solution until a Durant deal is found. They insist he's reinvested long term.
That was quick. Oh my God. Do you remember when I was basically looking at the fact that he was working out in Nets gear? That meant I still think that means something. because you're not if you're at odds with a team, no matter if you don't have that many clothes clean in your laundry, I'm pretty sure Kevin Durant has enough stockpile of Ola's basketball shorts that he can find something to work out in that's not Netsgear. Especially if he's angry with them.
Yeah, for sure.
I think this was a power play, and you know, I'm so glad to have my team back. I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about that report for bigger reasons. It just goes to show that sometimes you just have to have a cool head, right? All right. What are your biggest concerns before we end this one out?
I mean,
Our
look,
group chat is going crazy.
Yeah, I mean, look, you got to be just concerned generally of like, is everyone going to be on the same page if shit doesn't start off well? How is the team going to handle it? What's the actual situation involving Nash? Because I think
we got a tough 5 games coming too.
Yep, it's going to start off tough also. But look, I mean, like, if this team is healthy and clicking, the last time we saw this team relatively healthy, even without Ben Simmons and with no Harden or whatever against the Bucks series, that was the last time we really saw this team somewhat healthy, not even healthy. Like, they were awesome. And so, I have to be honest, I'm really interested, and this is something that people have not talked about because they've kind of washed it under the rug. I want to see if KD kind of changes his game at all, because right now, the way that he played in that Boston series was easy to plan for because he's still kind of adverse to taking a million threes, which is what he should be doing.
And he's good at it. I don't know why he doesn't just do it.
And he doesn't get to the hoop anymore or nearly as much. Like for everyone who compares him to like LeBron later in his career, like LeBron still gets to the free throw line at a pretty crazy rate considering his age. Like KD doesn't do that, and so I'm interested to see if teams learned how to play against KD better. But I think Kyrie will be fantastic this year. I think he's just got to stay healthy. And obviously, the biggest, what if is Ben Simmons, who I know, Ben Simmons' probably 2 biggest fans are you and Kool-Aid. And that dude has all the pressure in the world and at the same time no pressure because I guess the dude's locked in with, ungodly amounts of money. But I think he's going to fit in really well with this team, and I think they'll be able to play a pretty finesse style, which should help him a lot, and hopefully he'll be so motivated that he can take the pressure off of Kyrie and KD, who are at this point are obviously older than him.
Right, and on top of it, I think what he does for Kyrie and KD, they do for him. He does the things that they're not great at. He is elite at the things that they're not good at. So that, and vice versa, they're elite bucket getters. They're elite shot makers. He is an elite shot creator. That's hey, my peanut butter is in my chocolate's in your peanut butter. No, your chocolate is in my peanut butter. It just fits like Reese's cups, peanut butter cups. It just does. Chocolate and peanut butter is right together. Does peanut butter stick to the roof of your mouth? Yes. Is it a little sticky? Yes. Is chocolate a little, plain by itself? Put some peanut butter on it. Make it a peanut butter cup. That's what we're doing in Brooklyn this year. We're making peanut butter cups. It's delicious. Hey, what do you think of Scary's idea of Daniel Gafford at the 5?
Big fan of his. I went to a bunch of Wizards games last year when I was in DC. I think that dude can play. He's still absurdly young. He's like 22 or 23 years old. He's 6'10", like 230, 240. Can play on both sides. Like defensively not as well, but I think he's like a perfect dude to go for. I'm a very, very big fan of his. I thought it was really dumb how early the Bulls gave up on him. He turns 24 later in October, so still young. I would be incredibly happy for them to go after him. And like, it's just interesting, I guess there's like a month and change left until or about a month now until training camp, and like so much of the NBA season is on hold. Like I mean, so much of the NBA offseason was put on hold. Like you got to think that like the Jazz are going to trade a lot of guys. You got to think that like maybe the Hawks do some more moves. Everyone thought that John Collins was going to get traded like at the draft. You know, you still have a couple of free agents. You obviously have different injuries that'll pop up in training camp, and before that, that'll change the tone. I mean, it's unbelievable, but at this point, it looks like Russell Westbrook's going to be back in Los Angeles, which is crazy to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Pacers have, you know, the Miles Turner and who do you call and Buddy Hield, who's been in like a gazillion trade rumors. So I think there's still going to be a lot of pieces to be moved, and I think that'll probably open up everything involving the Nets and what they want. I mean, you know, one of the guys that I want is P.J. Washington, but I think, as you guys have rightfully said in the group chat, like this like horrendous Miles Bridges situation probably. If you're a Hornets fan, it's devastating on obviously a million different levels. First and foremost, what happened, but also like it's just a complete. I mean, it basically shoots your team. Like I mean, you basically just lost a max player for nothing.
Right, and what I'm more concerned about is what's the pedigree of players coming out of Washington. Not saying that everybody's going to be a Miles Bridges. I wouldn't say something that ridiculous, but those guys like P.J. Washington was in the clutches of Brittany Renner.
Yeah.
Where are the adults over there to kind of let those guys know what's going on? Like that's one of the things that I love about this summer is that our young guys stayed in Brooklyn for the most part. I saw a lot of them go home and do camps and stuff like that. But they've all been at, you know, you see them together at the Liberty games, which is a very Brooklyn Nets culture thing to do. And I love seeing them support Sabrina and the ladies at the Liberty.
Yep.
But they're bought in, right? Like people were trying to translate an eye roll to mean that Cam Thomas doesn't like Steve Nash. Cam Thomas has spent an entire summer with Steve Nash. An entire summer. He's in Brooklyn with Steve Nash right now. For the first time in years, and COVID had nothing to do with it because guys were, you know, back. The Nets players are going to the Brooklyn Nets camps. Trey went for the last 2 years, and no Nets player came, not one. Which seeing them, so many of them come, you know, Royce and yesterday Nick Claxton was doing center drills with Trey, which is pretty freaking cool, right?
Yeah.
But the kids, the team is acting different, and that's a small little sign. But I don't know, Sam. What's our record? I know that's the cliche. If we stay the way we are right now, what is the Nets? What? Fuck that. Because we're also judging Steve Nash. Now we can judge Steve Nash if, you know, no matter what this season's on Steve Nash and on Sean Marks.
Right.
However, what record should we have? And if we don't have it, it's their fault. And specifically, it's Steve Nash's fault. What record should this team be?
I think this team, you know, should be anywhere between, you know, like a 50 and 56 win team. What's
our record? What's our franchise record for wins?
I think it's somewhere in the 50s. I think they did a couple. I don't think they've ever done 60.
No. And I don't even think they did over 55. I think the Jason Kidd team, they went one year winning 49 games.
They won 52 his kid's first year. And it looks like that's their best season
ever.
In the ABA they had 55 and 58 and stuff like that. But in the NBA, their best record in the NBA is 52 and 30. And I see. It's crazy that in the KD Kyrie era they haven't broken that, because that's not even like some insane record. I mean the Pierce Allen Garnett first year with the Celtics went 66-16. Like, I mean, it's a joke that this Nets team has been like a high 40 team.
Right, but they played every game. They were dogs. That's the other thing. The reason why I would want Markieff Morris is because he's just one of those type of players. Like, if someone's gonna punch Grant Williams in the face, it's him, or me. But even though I like the play, I just want to punch him for the way he plays. But I think the Nets have to win. They have to break that record for Steve Nash to keep his job. That I'm gonna call for his job if he doesn't break 52. I think this is the best Brooklyn Nets team on paper that they've had since I've been following them very closely.
I agree.
I think for as many people who think I'm a Nash apologist, I'm not. I'm not gonna put the cart before the horse, though. The organization needed to get right, and the organization didn't do right by Nash the last 2 years, and so I want to see that. I want to see a preseason. No, excuse me. I want to see a training camp, a preseason, and a early season, and I want to see them come out the gate hot. There's no excuse. This is now all on Nash. Nash didn't pick his coaches the first 2 years. Nash has finally picked his coaches. He has distractions out of his locker room. He has time to install his stuff because there's not as much COVID stuff happening around him that, keeps players from playing, et cetera, et cetera. He's got to win. He's got to break that record. He's the fastest Nets coach to 100 wins. Now he has to break the other record to keep his job. 52 wins. You like that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that has to be broken. Like, I mean, look, this team. The big thing about Ben Simmons that I think changes everything is that Ben on any given night should be able to beat a somewhat mediocre NBA team by himself,
right?
Because of what he can do on both ends, and like we saw him do it against the Jazz. We've seen him like when he's fully engaged and motivated. The dude is like pretty unlike, like a lot of players. I agree with a lot of people who criticize him that he's definitely a flawed player and he's definitely a flawed playoff player, but he should be able to win regular season games giving 110% effort with even if Katie and Kyrie aren't playing. Like if he has shooters around him and a couple other guys to do like hard-nosed stuff, he should be fine.
Yeah, no, look. It's looking like Chet Holmgren might have a really bad injury.
Yeah, I just saw that. It's horrible.
Good thoughts, prayers going out to that kid. Look, if they have normalcy and the injuries aren't too crazy, they're gonna have injuries. There is no reason why this team shouldn't perform. Can I just, before we go out, can I just give you my Ben, why Ben is going to be great, Tyree?
Yeah.
And then we could end this thing out. Ben Simmons is going to be great because of what I keep saying. What he is elite at, the Nets need and didn't have last year. We have a lot of big wings now. Not a lot, but we have bigger wings now. Ben is the biggest wing that also plays point guard, that also plays defense, that also does the things that the Brooklyn Nets don't do well. But most importantly, and this is the thing that I can't agree with people, like every time I hear someone say, Ben's been out for 2 years. He hasn't played basketball for 2 years. That's a lie. Ben Simmons last played basketball June 20th, 2021. It's 2022. It couldn't have been 2 years. And the other thing is that Ben has mental issues. Ben doesn't have mental issues. His only mental issue was that I might not get my millions that I forfeited by sitting out last year. I might not get my money. Well, 20 million is a lot of money. I'm hearing he got between 12 and 13 million of that to avoid going to arbitration, to avoid leaking out the evidence of stuff, crazy stuff that the Sixers were doing. Instead of embarrassing everybody, let's just settle. And I'm hearing Ben got between 12 and 13 million. Ben is going to work because Ben only does basketball. Ben doesn't have a clothing line. Ben doesn't meditate. Ben likes to make a lot of money in basketball, buy fast cars, and date hot women. That's what Ben likes. The way Ben gets all that stuff is playing basketball. He doesn't have a cult following. There's no 35 ventures. He's never won a ring. His reputation is in the shit. Everyone has something to prove, and I love it. 52 wins. You want to tell me why I'm foolish, or you like it?
No, I'm with you. I think they have a lot of guys who have a lot of things to prove, and I think in professional sports at this point, that's kind of what you need to have. We see all the time, it used to be that some players would crack when they're in these contract seasons, but it seems like more often than not, the money is so big. All these guys are just so locked in. You look at what Aaron Judge is doing this year with the Yankees, in a contract year. It's just, I don't know. I think it kind of felt like the Nets, with everything that went on, kind of had to hit rock bottom, and the combination of the injuries this year, the Harden trade, and getting swept, coupled with the KD trade demand and the Kyrie saga this summer, it was basically they had hit rock bottom. They were the joke of the NBA, and the fact that they have come out of it with a roster that's better than what they had last year, and what seems like all the stars, both I guess figuratively and literally, aligned in terms of wanting to play at the Barclays Center this year. I think it's hard to not think that there's has to be some good juju going, and I'm knocking on wood, but you think about how unlucky this team has been with obviously they signed KD with knowing the injury and whatnot, but the injuries in the first year, the Kyrie leaving, the Bucks series, the vaccine mandate, the Joe Harris injury, Ben Simmons' back surgery, all that stuff, KD with another injury, it just seems like something's got to give, and I'm happy that they're not going to leave, assuming that everybody is there to start opening day against the Pelicans. It seems like, they're actually coming out of this 3-year stretch of basically nothing going their way with a roster that I think can be really special. Look, we've been potting for over an hour. We didn't even talk about the fact that the Nets signed to a veteran minimum a guy who lit up the bubble, and TJ Warren. The guy was one of the 5 best scorers in the bubble, and look, he had a bad foot injury. We've seen that derail many careers, as you just said. Chet Holmgren already has one now, and that's what happens with these 6'8", 6'9", taller, thinner wings. But if TJ Warren provides anything for them, that's a massive boost. TJ Warren is TJ Warren was going to get, based off of how he was playing in the bubble, or not even in the bubble, but even before that, as a really good serviceable player, was probably going to get a 4-year, $80 million year just because he's a 6'8" scorer. That's how much those guys get.
Right. And the nice thing is he's a nice stand-in on nights. You could give KD 20 games to rest as long as he's healthy, as long as Warren is healthy. And you could just start Warren some games. And guess what? If you've got Ben and Kyrie, you'll still win. And you could just rotate those guys. You could put games on the calendar. You could find out, Kyrie, what's the 15 games that you want to rest? And they could knock that out. I really am stoked about this team because it's the first time that Sean Marks answered the big wing issue. I think he realized it was an issue. I think KD realized that early on in the offseason. He tweeted, "Wings run the NBA," I hope I'm quoting that right, but something like that.
Yeah, it's a wing or
And
something.
it's a wing league, yeah. Um, the most important thing that and I've said this to you a million times, they needed to know what was wrong internally. They needed to know what was wrong with them. Of course, the players weren't going to agree. Remember what I said? They're the fish in the fishbowl. Um, but if you are a team that does not know what's wrong with them, then you flail, then you make bad choices, then you go backwards. Your organization fractures and turns on each other. That to have everything that happened in the early part of off season, and to go into the off season coming off of a 4-game sweep, for us to end out our off season, or for our off season to be ending out with this, it shows that Joe Tsai is pretty good at business. Sean Marks is pretty good at being a associate governor, and Kevin Durant is not a fool. So, all those things being the case, I think we're looking pretty good, man.
And by the way, about the so I agree with everything you just said. Just going really quickly back to the T.J. Warren thing, like the Nets have the Nets have signed in the past, guys who are kind of, supposed to be go-to scorers off the bench a little bit. If you remember, like earlier in the Brooklyn experiment, like the whole the Marcus Thorntons of the world and Allen Andersons and whatnot.
And he's not that. He's better than those guys.
He's way better than that, but that's literally where he is in the depth chart right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those guys were undersized, were not nearly as talented in the same stratosphere, but that's basically like Marcus Thornton and Allen Anderson, while they could lose you a game, could also win you a game, and that's kind of what T.J. Warren is going to be asked for. Like, T.J. Warren got a vet minimum deal. Like, T.J. Warren's getting what Hassan Whiteside is getting. Like that's what we're talking about. So
that's a great example of like how good of a deal that was. A guy who got 42 in the playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean,
Great
you're talking about Royce O'Neal, who was a starter on a Jazz team in the West, when the West is loaded. Like,
Laker fans were telling me Royce O'Neal doesn't play that good of defense.
Yeah,
he's been a part of the number one defense in the NBA the last 4 years, and it's not because of Donovan Mitchell.
And he also, by the way, was playing on a defense where they had one all-worldly defender and everyone else sucked, and he was basically he basically was the second guy that they had to go to.
Correct.
Defensively, and we don't even know if Royce O'Neal is going to be starting on this team. In fact, he probably won't be. I would say
probably won't. I think here's my 5, and then you could give me your 5. My 5 is Kyrie at the faux point guard. I call him a false point guard. Joe at the shooting guard. Kevin at the small forward. Ben at the point forward. Claxton. That's the team. And then you have rotations where KD plays with both T.J. Warren and Royce O'Neal, and then you have another rotation where it's Ben and Claxton and all the 3-point shooters. You could play around with, like, there's no excuses for Nash. This is not what happened last year. This is way different. And I liked what happened last year because I was like, hey, if they think these old guys can play, then fine, let's do it. But this is so much better. This is way better than we did.
What's amazing about what you just said is that you just said that, Rob, which I agree, that sounds like the right starting 5. And you didn't even mention in that starting 5 Seth, Patty Mills, T.J. Warren, Royce O'Neal, and the 3 rookies.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty crazy of what we're talking about here. Like,
right.
Plus Edmund Sumner. Like,
right. I forgot about him.
Like, I mean, that's pretty. I mean, to have Seth Curry, who was starting and was playing a dominant pick and roll with Embiid, to have Royce O'Neal, who was a small forward on a mid tier playoff team in the West coming off the bench, coupled with Patty Mills and T.J. Warren, is pretty freaking impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, throw in a Mike James, even though that's not the real answer for point guard. They do need a backup point guard.
They do.
You could play Kyrie at point guard for small stretches, or the lead. He's gonna be the lead ball handler for stretches. There's gonna be times where it's just gonna be him and KD, or maybe KD and Ben, and then Kyrie and Ben, and like the way you could throw this team out is just so incredible. I don't think you need, like, people keep saying we need a stretch five. There's only 3 spots on the 3-point line that you could stand on. Left wing, right wing, top of key. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
What you want from there is, because you've got one ball handler who's either going to score off the dribble, and you don't necessarily need another 3-point shooter because Ben can't shoot. What you need is you probably need a reverse stretch. You need a stretch big, but a reverse stretch big, meaning if I'm standing on the 3-point line, you can't hedge on my shooters, because I could just I could just throw an alley-oop or dump it down to a guy who's just going to dunk it. You understand? If everyone's out guarding the perimeter, or even trying to get the ball out of Ben Simmons' hands, he just has to toss it into the 5, and they have to take him seriously because he could just catch it and dunk it. So I don't think you necessarily need a Miles Turner, because where is he going to stand on the 3-point line? Wouldn't you prefer to have any of our players, almost, because we have so many shooters? Wouldn't you prefer to have maybe, Kyrie on one side and KD on the other side? Wouldn't you prefer to have Joe Harris on one side and Seth on the other side? Wouldn't you rather have Royce O'Neal on one side, Kessler Edwards on the other? Like, you could, the different machinations that you could come out with is incredible. I just don't see why, on a team that has so much shooting, that you necessarily. I think you need interior defense. You do. You need a staunch, like a guy that you could plug into the middle, and that could just be your road grader. I don't think you need another. You have the 2 best career 3-point shooters in the NBA on your team. It's going to provide a ton of space to 2 of the best ISO players there are. And then on top of it, you have the guy that could find 3-point shooters where they need to be, or throw alley-oops, or dunk on you himself.
Right.
I don't know. I don't share the freak out, or like, let's trade some of the stuff that we've got to get Miles Turner or someone like that. I just don't see the necessity of it. Not the way the Nets could play.
No, I agree. I don't think it's necessary either. I think also when you have guys that are as talented as KD and Kyrie, and with other guys who can shoot that way. Like, look, ideally it would be nice to have the optionality, but I don't think that's what's going to stop them from winning a title. Like, I think there's, they need a backup point guard. I think they need some type of. First of all, I think there's been a bit too much of a focus on size, as opposed to look, if you have a guy like PJ Tucker who's 6'5" but is willing to box out anybody, like, height doesn't matter nearly as much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sure the Sixers are going to play PJ Tucker at times at the 4, because he can. And so
right. The Celtics played, even though Horford could shoot a little bit, he's still shooting in the 20s, and from 3, that is. And, you know what I mean? Horford, Robert Williams, and, even Marcus Smart is not that great of 3-point shooters. When they put Grant Williams out there, they got a pretty good 3-point shooter. But it's still not the guys we have. We have way better 3-point shooting than any team. I don't think that there's a team that can shoot with us. There's no team that wants to get in a jump shooting contest with the Brooklyn Nets, especially now.
They have 4 guys on the team that are capable, that are realistically, if you told someone that one of these four guys went 50, 40, 90, you'd be like, oh, that makes sense.
Right.
Like,
they have four. No, I would say they have three legit 50, 40, 90 guys. Kyrie and KD, of course.
Yep.
And even though he's been shit his whole career from the free throw line, he could do it. I think Joe could do it. Matter of fact, I think Seth could do it.
And Seth could do it, yeah.
Dude, we all right. Good news. I hope our fan base and the people who covered the team kind of open their eyes, wipe the coal out their eyes, and see, yo, it's not that bad here, as Joe Johnson says.
Exactly.
It's not that bad here. We're pretty good. Got anything else, Sam?
No, that's it, man. I'm excited. We're a month away from training camp, so we'll be potting soon. We'll be potting soon and more frequently, and we'll get Scary on and Bam and Kool-Aid, etc.
Yeah, the whole Pod Thorn crew. We are Pod Thorn. We out.
Peace.
Pod Thorn. Pod Thorn. Pod Thorn.